Hello, my friend. Today we'll be exploring and discussing the topic. Men, if you want 2026 to be a fulfilling year, join us as we dive deeper into it. I'm going to say something most men only figure out after their ambition is already dead, after the business idea is gone, after the creative fire is gone, after they've been reduced to a predictable version of themselves they barely recognize. Some women don't kill your dream because they hate you. They kill it because your dream destabilizes the emotional arrangement they've built their sense of safety around. And most men are too naive to recognize what's happening while it's happening. You see, nobody ever tells you this directly, but a man with a real dream is an emotional liability in the short term. He's inconsistent, he's distracted, he's not endlessly available. He doesn't center his life around constant reassurance. His mood fluctuates with progress, setbacks, uncertainty, and pressure. And that is deeply uncomfortable for a woman whose emotional stability depends on predictability rather than purpose. So what happens instead of open opposition is something far more dangerous. The dream becomes emotionally expensive to maintain. Not because she forbids it outright, but because every step forward seems to trigger friction. Arguments appear out of nowhere. Emotional needs suddenly escalate. Small issues become big conversations. You start noticing a pattern you can't quite articulate. Whenever momentum builds, peace disappears. Most men misinterpret this as coincidence or stress or relationship maintenance. They tell themselves this is what adulthood looks like. What they don't realize is that their nervous system is being trained slowly, subtly. Progress is being paired with discomfort. Stability is being paired with compliance. Over time, the body learns the lesson before the mind does. This is not malicious in most cases, it's psychological. Some women attach not to who you are, but to how you make them feel. When you are emotionally centered on them, when your attention shifts to something abstract, future-oriented, and demanding, the attachment bond weakens. For a woman who has not learned to self-regulate anxiety, that loss of emotional centrality feels like abandonment, even if you're physically present. So she reacts the only way she knows how. She tries to restore equilibrium, not by saying stop, but by creating conditions where continuing feels wrong, where you feel guilty for being absent, where you feel selfish for prioritizing something that doesn't immediately benefit the relationship, where you begin explaining yourself more, justifying your choices, shrinking timelines, softening edges. You start negotiating with your own future in exchange for emotional calm. And here's where men screw this up completely. They assume concern equals care. They assume resistance equals wisdom. They assume that if someone loves them, their fear must be valid. But fear is not insight. Fear is just fear. And anxiety does not evaluate dreams based on reality, only on how threatening they feel right now. Another dynamic men don't understand until it's too late is identity threat. When your dream grows, your frame changes. You stop needing permission. You stop needing constant affirmation. Your self-respect becomes internally sourced. That shift is attractive to healthy women and intolerable to insecure ones, because insecurity feeds on leverage, and leverage disappears when a man has purpose. So control re-enters through influence, approval becomes conditional, emotional warmth fluctuates with compliance. You're praised when you accommodate, you're withdrawn from when you don't. Nothing explicit, nothing you can call out without sounding paranoid, just enough pressure to make self-betrayal feel like maturity. And you tell yourself you're being a good partner. You tell yourself this is compromise. You tell yourself the dream can wait, but it never comes back the same. Dreams starve when you stop feeding them with risk, obsession, and time. They don't survive on intention alone. Some women also come from chaos, financial instability, emotional volatility, inconsistent male figures. These women do not experience ambition as inspiring. They experience it as dangerous. Their nervous system does not distinguish between reckless risk and calculated growth.
Both register as threat. And because threat demands resolution, the fastest way to feel safe is to pull you back into predictability. Again, not evil, just unexamined psychology. The result is the same. Your life becomes smaller, more reasonable, more manageable. You become the man who could have been something instead of the man who became it. And the most brutal part is that when the dream is finally gone, the relationship often collapses anyway, because the very thing that once differentiated you is no longer there. That's the part nobody warns you about. Men don't lose their dreams in dramatic confrontations. They lose them in 1,000 small concessions that feel mature in the moment and hollow in retrospect. They wake up one day with stability, routine, and quiet resentment, wondering why they feel numb instead of fulfilled. This is why discernment matters more than attraction. A woman does not need to understand your dream. She does not need to cheerlead it, but she must be able to tolerate it without making you pay an emotional tax for pursuing it. If your ambition consistently creates tension, guilt, or emotional withdrawal, you're not in a partnership, you're in a regulation system. Your purpose is not negotiable, your future is not a shared anxiety management tool. And any woman who requires you to shrink so she can feel safe is not a companion, she's an anchor. Some women are dream killers, not because they hate men, but because they cannot survive alongside a man who refuses to stay emotionally small. And if you don't understand that early, you'll spend the rest of your life explaining why you never became what you once knew you could be. And here is the part that stings, because it puts responsibility back in your hands instead of giving you an enemy to blame. A woman can't kill a dream you refuse to put up for negotiation in the first place. She can apply pressure, she can create tension, she can test boundaries, she can even leave, but she cannot slowly dismantle your future unless you participate in the dismantling by trading your mission for temporary relief. That is why I keep saying this is psychological. The leverage only works because it's applied to a predictable weakness in men. The weakness of wanting to be seen as good, fair, considerate, emotionally mature, and reasonable, even when reasonable is being used as a weapon against anything great you're trying to build. Most men are terrified of being labeled selfish, so they start treating their own purpose like it's something they have to earn the right to pursue. They start acting like their dream is a guilty pleasure instead of a life direction. And once you internalize that frame, you start behaving like a man who needs permission to become himself. You don't notice the shift at first because it doesn't announce itself as surrender. It announces itself as compromise. It announces itself as balance. It announces itself as being there and showing up and not neglecting your relationship. And those are real responsibilities, but you need to be sharp enough to see the difference between responsibility and domestication. Because what happens is predictable. You try to be a good man, so you begin explaining more. You begin justifying more. You begin defending your schedule, defending your priorities, defending why you're tired, defending why you can't be fully present all the time. And every time you do this, you reinforce one idea in the relationship. Your purpose is on trial. And once your purpose is on trial, your partner becomes the judge of whether your ambition is acceptable. And that is not love, that is governance. A relationship cannot thrive when your identity is constantly being audited. A healthy partner does not require constant explanation. A healthy partner may miss you, may want more time, may feel the strain of your building phase, but she is able to say, "I don't like this discomfort, but I understand it." And she is able to self-regulate like an adult rather than turning every uncomfortable feeling into a crisis you have to solve. The women who become dream killers are often the ones who cannot tolerate discomfort without externalizing it. So they transfer the discomfort into you and then act like you created it on purpose. That's when you start hearing a certain kind of conversation that drains the soul out of a man. It's not the content, it's the implication. You can feel when a conversation is about connecting, and you can feel when a conversation is about controlling. The controlling conversation has a hidden demand inside it, and the hidden demand is always the same. Reduce your trajectory until my nervous system feels safe again. It might be framed as a concern about money or time or stress or us,
But the solution always points back to you becoming smaller, more predictable, more centered on the relationship as the main pillar of meaning. Now, some men hear this and think the solution is to become cold, distant, rigid, to treat every need as manipulation. That's not maturity either. That's just overcorrection. The real solution is a form of calm leadership that most men never practice because they confuse leadership with dominance. Leadership here means you can hold a direction without being emotionally pulled off course. It means you can listen without collapsing. You can empathize without surrendering. You can reassure without bargaining away your future. And you can only do that if you have a clear internal standard for what a supportive relationship actually looks like. Because if your definition of support is she never complains, you'll choose the wrong women. If your definition of support is she always agrees, you'll choose the wrong women. If your definition of support is she makes me feel like a hero, you'll choose the wrong women. A supportive woman is not a cheerleader. A supportive woman is a stable base. She can disagree with your plan, she can have concerns, but she does not punish you for being the man you said you were. This is why you need to learn to screen in a way that doesn't depend on speeches and promises. Anybody can say, "I support you." Anybody can post motivational quotes. Anybody can claim they love ambition. You don't see the truth in what someone says when everything is calm and nothing is being tested. You see the truth when the pressure arrives, when you're not fully available, when you're stressed, when you're building, when you're making decisions that don't revolve around her emotions, and she has to either adapt like a grown woman or destabilize the situation until you fold. A lot of men mistakenly believe they can communicate a woman out of her anxiety. You can't. You can create clarity, you can create structure, you can create consistent connection, but you cannot talk someone out of a nervous system pattern they've been reinforcing for years. If she regulates distress by escalating, if she restores security by controlling, if she reacts to uncertainty by tightening her grip, those are patterns. They won't disappear because you gave a better explanation. In fact, endless explanation often makes it worse because it teaches her that emotional pressure buys her access to your focus. This is where boundaries become the real love language, not in some trendy way, but in a practical way. A boundary is what prevents your relationship from becoming a system where the loudest emotions steer the direction. And men who don't have boundaries get trained. They get trained into being a permission-seeking version of themselves. They start checking in before they make moves, not out of respect, but out of fear. They start delaying decisions until the emotional weather is calm. They become men whose courage is scheduled around someone else's mood. You know what that produces over time? A quiet form of self-contempt. You might not call it that, but you'll feel it. You'll feel it when you see other men building and you wonder why you stopped. You'll feel it when you remember how alive you used to be before you started negotiating every ounce of your ambition. You'll feel it when you catch yourself being irritated over small things, because the irritation isn't really about small things. It's about the fact that you have been living against your own direction for too long. And here's another uncomfortable truth. Some men prefer relationships that feel emotionally intense because it distracts them from the discipline required to build. They will never admit this, but if you choose a woman whose life is constant turbulence, you always have a reason to delay your dream. There's always a crisis, there's always drama, there's always a new emotional fire. And if your own dream scares you, if you're afraid of failing, if you're afraid of being exposed, that kind of relationship becomes a convenient prison, because you can blame the circumstances for why you never became what you said you'd become. So, if we're going to be serious about this topic, we have to acknowledge that dream killing is often a collaboration. It's a dance between a partner who applies pressure and a man who doesn't know how to hold his frame under pressure. The woman's anxiety meets the man's guilt. The woman's desire for predictability meets the man's fear of being seen as selfish.
The woman's need for constant emotional centrality meets the man's habit of over-explaining. The result is the same. The dream becomes an orphan in your own life. Now let's talk about what to do if you recognize this pattern. Because a lot of men hear a narration like this and immediately jump to leave. And sometimes leaving is the right answer, but not always and not first. The first move is to restore structure. If you are building something real, your life needs a rhythm. Your relationship needs a rhythm too. You need set connection time that is consistent, not random bursts of attention that feel like guilt-driven compensation. Many women become more anxious when a man's availability becomes unpredictable. So paradoxically, a man who is building can often reduce conflict by being more structured, not more accommodating. That means you decide what you can give and you give it consistently, instead of letting emotional pressure determine what you give on any given day. Then you observe what happens when the structure is set. Does she settle into the rhythm like someone who can adapt, or does she keep pushing for more, not because she needs more, but because she needs to feel in control? A mature woman may not love the rhythm at first, but she respects it and learns to work with it. An insecure woman treats rhythm as rejection and keeps escalating until you abandon it. The pattern will reveal itself quickly once you stop improvising around her emotions. You also need to see how she responds when you calmly refuse guilt. Not aggressively, not cruelly, but calmly. When she says she feels neglected and you respond with reality, with warmth, with, "I care about you and I'm also building and this is the structure," does she listen or does she escalate? Does she become collaborative or does she become punitive? Because punitive responses are the marker of a dynamic that will only get worse as your dream grows. If she punishes your autonomy now, she will punish it more later. Because the more successful you become, the less control she feels, and the more her insecurity will look for ways to restore leverage. And I want to say something that will save you a lot of time if you can accept it early. You cannot negotiate your way into being respected. You can negotiate behaviors, schedules, expectations, but you cannot negotiate respect. Respect comes from how you carry yourself. It comes from consistency. It comes from the fact that you are not easily moved by emotional pressure. If you keep folding, you teach your partner that your purpose is optional. If your purpose is optional, you become optional too. Because purpose is a large part of what makes a man feel solid. And when a man is not solid, he starts grasping for validation. And grasping for validation is repulsive, even to the person who trained him into it. That's why the final tragedy of dream killing isn't just the dream, it's the man who changes. He becomes a softer, more hesitant, more approval-seeking version of himself. And then the relationship begins to lose the very tension, polarity, and direction that made it feel alive. People don't like hearing this because it sounds harsh, but you've seen it happen. The man stops pursuing his mission, and instead of the relationship becoming paradise, it becomes stale, resentful, and disrespected. Because the underlying dynamic was never, "we just need more time together." The underlying dynamic was, "I need you to be smaller so I feel safe." And once you become smaller, the safety doesn't turn into love, it turns into control. So when I tell you that some women are dream killers, what I'm really telling you is that some women cannot be with a man who insists on becoming himself. They can be with a man who orbits them, who is predictable, who is emotionally manageable, who makes decisions that keep the relationship calm, but they cannot be with a man who has a mission that sometimes makes him unavailable, and sometimes makes him intense, and sometimes makes him risk everything for something that matters. They will interpret that man as unsafe, and they will try to tame him, and they will call it love. Your job is not to hate them for it. Your job is to recognize it and not sacrifice your life to it. Because if you do, you'll end up in the most pathetic position a man can be in. You'll be the one who gave up the dream. You'll be the one who became predictable.
And then you'll still be the one explaining to himself why he feels empty, why he feels numb, why he feels like he's living someone else's life, all while the person who pressured him to shrink wonders why he no longer feels like the man she chose. If this message touched you in any way, comment below. Real talk. Go ahead and like this video, share and subscribe to transform more men in the world. Do not forget to support the channel, link in description. So, what are your thoughts on today's topic? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel Psychological Depth so you won't miss any of our upcoming posts. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.